I don't know.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Executive Committee meeting of the LCTCS Board of Supervisors, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few points, given that we're holding an in-person meeting of the committee and streaming the audio of the meeting virtually. The meeting audio is being live streamed online. Please be mindful of that. Those joining by remote access are each asked to keep yourselves on mute during the meeting. Please use the raise hand feature if you have a comment or question. When recognized to speak, unmute yourself. Give it a few seconds before you make your comments. Thank you for joining us today. Then return back to mute to avoid background noise during the remainder of the meeting. If you have trouble with your technology at any point, you should text or call Sarah Klein-Peter, the board coordinator. You're able to view board items via the links posted on the LCTCS website. We will conduct a roll call at the start of the meeting, but board members attending the meeting in person are the only ones able to participate in voting on items. Public comments can be made during today's meeting via open conference call at 877-810-9415, access code 6499147#. That information is in the notice of meetings posted on the LCTCS website at www.lctcs.edu. Any public comments received will be read during the meeting by the board secretary or designee. All public comments must include an agenda item number, a name, and a brief statement. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per comment. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn to you for a call meeting to order.
All right, let's call the May 6, 2020 LCTCS Board of Supervisors meeting to order, and we'll do a pledge of allegiance. Our flag's over here in the corner. This group will stand up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Ms. Klein-Peter, would you please conduct the roll call?
Yes, I'd be happy to conduct the roll call, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Toops?
Here.
Supervisor Price?
Here.
Supervisor Mount is joining us remotely. Supervisor Hardy?
Here.
Supervisor Tim Hardy is in the room with us. Supervisor Michael Murphy is joining us remotely. Supervisor Stevie Smith.
Here.
And members of the board who have joined us remotely, I will call a roll just to have a record of who's here with us electronically. So Supervisor Murphy is here. Supervisor Roman Hardy is here. Supervisor Tari Bradford is here. And Supervisor Willie Mount is here. Is there any other members of the board that are on electronically? If you would unmute yourself and let us know if I've missed you. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum of the committee present in this room.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. I need to seek approval for the meeting agenda for the May 6, 2020 meeting as presented.
The motion by Mr. Hardy and a second by Mr. Price.
Need a move to approve, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Thanks. Moves unanimously. We're moving to item E, which is approval of the minutes from the January 31st, 2018 meeting as presented. Need to seek a motion and a second, please.
Motion by Mr. Price and a second by Mr. Smith.
All signify by saying aye for approve.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move to the reports. We'll start with the chair of the board report. And I know why this is on here. It's because I haven't done mine yet. But the Tier 2.1 annual report is due on May 15th. If you haven't done it, do it. I know it secretly inside some of us, we were waiting for an extension of that. We didn't get it. And Michael has been very clear. You don't have it. Let's make sure you get it on the 15th. Outside of that, I don't have anything it's super pressing to report. I'm just hoping everyone is staying safe and healthy. So we'll move now from my report to item number 2. Dr. Sullivan will give us the president's report.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and very much appreciate each of you taking the time to be here physically present, and appreciate those on the line for taking the time today to join the meeting virtually. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the impact of the pandemic on our colleges from a financial point of view, and I want to begin with kind of an outlay of the work that is going on with our colleges by category. By category, I mean revenue stream category. As you're aware, our colleges are about 35 to 40% dependent upon state general fund. It is clear from the collections that the state of Louisiana has had for the months of March and April that revenue is significantly down for the state. We anticipate that number, at least 2 weeks ago, we anticipated that number would be in the $600 to $750 million range. What we are beginning to understand now is that number is upwards of $1 billion. The numbers continue to climb. It is not a positive direction. And so we continue to work with the parties in House Appropriations and in Senate Finance to make sure that we minimize the amount of impact to our colleges and state general fund cut. However, suffice it to say that we will see cuts in state general fund. The numbers at this point, we were expecting that we likely would see cuts to the $200 million range for higher education overall. That would mean about a $30 million cut for our colleges. That is pretty profound. We have not seen that level of one-time cut even through the more difficult years that we faced over the last decade. Having said that, the thing that our leadership team has become quite capable of, fortunately or unfortunately, is focusing on the revenue streams that we can impact. We'll continue to fight the good fight down at the legislature and push hard to make the case for our funding. But right now, the most important thing that we can impact is maximizing the dollar that is coming from the federal stimulus, which is the CARES Act money, which is roughly $20.5 million that is coming to our colleges that allow us to be able to offset some of the costs of COVID-19, but also to be able to prepare a bit for what we know will be a very difficult 2021 fiscal year. Following that, we are also focused closely on enrollment for summer and fall. Right now, the most important thing we can do is focus on revenue from an enrollment point of view. And you see many across the horizon out there that are focused on cuts in expenditures. We obviously are doing those things. We are locking down personnel, hiring freeze, travel freeze, those kinds of things. But the reality is that's not enough in a situation like we're talking about here. We both have to look at the cost side, but as well spend our time thinking about the revenue side as well. Colleges are doing things like offering institutional aid for students to attend during the summer. At Delgado, as an example, take 2 courses. One is free. You pay for one. That's a strategy to really help reach out and grab those students that may be university students who are attending, intent on going back to their university in the fall that we may not have seen in Delgado during the summer. It's better to have students pay for a course than to not show up at all. So trying to maximize the revenue to the extent that we can. You see others across the higher ed spectrum, like the University of Louisiana system, who came out yesterday with a price point that is significantly reduced, about 45% reduction in the cost for those adults coming back to college, taking online courses. So the marketplace is changing on us, and we're having to spend our time not just focused on the cost side, but focus even more so on the revenue side than ever before. So there are a couple of things that we will focus on beyond that, and that is the institutional aid policy that you put in place, I think about 2 years ago. You authorized the colleges to set aside up to 10% of the self-generated revenue dollar that they collected the prior year. So if I'm at Louisiana Delta and I collected $10 million in self-generated revenue in fiscal year 19, they have the authority to set aside $1 million, up to $1 million for institutional aid to help students make the decision to attend Louisiana Delta. It is a strategy that is used largely by the private sector institutions across the country, not so much by public institutions, but we're finding ourselves in that space today. So focusing again on the cost side, state budget, the CARES Act dollar maximization, and then the institutional aid process to make sure that we grab as many students as we can. The reality is this: summer we could be up by 20% or we could be down by 20%. The level of uncertainty is the greatest challenge that we have right now. So we're having to plan for both circumstances. In addition to that, the fall enrollment is just as uncertain. I think we probably may at this point, just because of proximity to the start of the summer term, we may have a better idea of where we are in summer than we do in fall. But remember, the summer term tends to be a better revenue generator for us than the fall in terms of enrollment. So if you think about the impact that could have, having a really good summer can be a boon for us. Having a poor summer could put us in a difficult spot in terms of kickstarting in the fall. All of that said, part of the challenge that we are facing today is the timing issue at the Capitol. Recognizing that we're in a difficult financial situation, knowing that there's likely to be a state general fund cut, we also know that the likelihood is the legislature is going to have to come back in at some point in late summer or fall and consider revenue measures. A change in the state's tax collections that happens in fall or maybe even as late as January 1 really doesn't do much to change our FY 2021 budget. First of all, if we collected new revenue in January, it only has the potential to have a 50% cut, or 50% impact for us. So our colleges are having to plan for an academic year that is more uncertain than really anything we've ever faced. But I can assure you, every one of them are focused on delivering the mission, even in the craziness that we're dealing with now, be it financial or otherwise. As a result of some conversations with the chairman, I have worked with Joe Marine. We have put together a resolution that I would like to ask Joe to read. There are a number of whereas statements on the front end that outline some of the facts that you all know. I won't ask Joe to read the entirety of the resolution, but I would like for Joe to read the therefore portion and ask for your consideration in adopting that resolution. And the reality is the resolution is really the board's request of the colleges to focus on the things that we have just outlined and that we've had an opportunity to talk about as we talk individually by phone over the last few weeks with each member of the board. So with that, Joe, I will ask that you unmute and read the therefore portion of the resolution. Individual board members that are present in the room are receiving now the physical copy of the resolution. So Joe?
Yes, sir. Good morning, members of the board. As Dr. Sullivan mentioned, the resolution is a little bit lengthy, the therefore language that encapsulates, though, many aspects of what Dr. Sullivan recently talked about. So I'll proceed with the reading of the therefore section of the resolution. Therefore, be it resolved, the LCTCS Board of Supervisors urges and requests that LCTCS colleges, in conjunction with the system president, continue the extraordinary work of delivering on the 2-year college mission for the people of Louisiana in these unprecedented times, while taking the steps necessary to mitigate the immediate and longer-term impacts of the pandemic and the economic downturn on the delivery of education and training, to include but not be limited to preparing for potential state general fund reductions in fiscal year 2021, preparing for uncertain enrollment and operational changes that will likely impact revenue and expenses, maximizing the institutional funds under the CARES Act, and bolster efforts to provide college-sponsored institutional financial aid to students by authorizing the temporary elimination of the financial aid cap specified in LCTCS policy 5.025 for fiscal years 2020 and 2021.
You've heard the resolution language and the therefore statement. And perhaps at this time, I'd like to turn back to the board and ask for your consideration of that resolution.
Amani, I can't motion. We're going to seek motion. Let's go ahead and get a motion in a second. For the approval.
So we have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Tim Hardy.
Anybody have any questions for Monty?
I mean, I have some general questions. I don't need to hold the resolution up, but just some questions about some of the status, and everything, but I don't want to hold up the resolution, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any objections or questions about the resolution. I have some questions about the summary you gave us.
Sure. And we can talk about those.
I'll handle the resolution first, Mr. Chairman, and that way we don't forget to do that. But
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so look, let's go ahead and so we got the motion and second. All those who agree to sign the resolution, to approve the resolution, please do so by signifying aye.
Aye.
Any abstaining or against, signify by saying nay. Passes unanimously. Ms. Kleinbeater.
We're just going to ask if there are any members of the board that would like to make a comment on this item before it passes, even though they don't have the voting opportunity. If they have a comment, we would like to hear it at this time. Just give them a minute.
Check the minutes. I did ask for that. No one said it.
Thank you for taking that action. So Supervisor Smith, you want to?
Well, just a couple of things, because you covered a lot of ground in your summary just now, and I did note the UL action, right? That was pretty significant, and so I guess it's less of a question, more of an observation. That would be interesting to see how that affects folks that come to our institutions, because one of the things that we provide is education at a little bit lower cost than some of the other institutions, and that action they took changes that dynamic somewhat. Okay. I'm not asking for any necessary opinion about how it's going to affect any individual college, but that certainly changes the dynamic substantially.
It does. It does. Just to put a little bit of a perspective to it, the reduction by 45%, say at Nichols, reduces the price point per credit hour at Nichols for an adult student returning to $275 a credit hour.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that same course at Fletcher is about $185 a credit hour. So you can see that the amount of distance between where we are with our four-year partners is significantly reduced as a result of that step. And so one of the things that we're asking for is to relieve the cap in institutional aid so that individual colleges can come back and identify the appropriate amount in their market that they believe should be put in place in institutional aid. If you're in a market like Delgado, where there are multiple institutions, private and public, where the competition is much greater, you may need a greater level of institutional aid flexibility. If you're in a place like Louisiana Delta, where maybe the competition isn't quite as great with one other institution there, then you may not need as much institutional aid. And so that's kind of the direction that we're headed. The thing to keep in mind here is if you were to do a price elasticity study to kind of get a sense of where price should reside, it has been blown up over the last 8 weeks. What is expected by folks in terms of the service as well as the cost has totally changed in 8 weeks. We've never seen a disruption like that. And so it's going to require flexibility for our colleges at a local level to make some of these hard decisions. So that is the reason for connecting the dots on those points.
So the other question I have is, and I think you've covered this a little bit in your briefings to the board, is the CARES Act dollars have two components. Some of it's to support the institutions, some of it's going to students, right? So,
That's correct.
And I guess I don't want to be too redundant, but that's part of the equation as well. Some of that's coming in to support the institutions.
That's right.
But that's only to be, I mean, the stuff going to institutions is only for CARES Act response.
That's correct. So I'm glad you brought that up because there are many people, particularly in the Capitol, who believe we got the CARES Act dollar that came to the state of Louisiana, 41 million roughly for our colleges. And because we received that dollar, we've received something that maybe then the state can bump down its state support. That's not the case. Remember, 20.5 million of that dollar went straight out to students. We received none. That dollar is being pushed out to students right now at colleges all across the state as per the federal guidelines. So put that aside, roughly half gone. The other half is being spent on those expenses that we incurred to transition to online courses for the courses that we transition, to create a safe environment for those technical programs to be delivered. And then the third part is to do teleworking environments for our employees. We anticipate that those expenses will be well over the $5 million mark. In addition to that, the remaining 15 million, we believe, will be incurred across the summer and likely the fall term. So this thing is not over, right? We're still dealing with a whole heck of a lot of costs that we would not have seen otherwise. So the part of the message that we'll have to deliver in the Capitol is that the CARES Act dollar is not intended to replace state general fund, but is instead intended to help offset costs. I can also tell you that many of our colleagues across the country and who have dormitories and meal plans, they've already chewed through their CARES Act dollar because they've had to reimburse students.
Yeah, the CARES Act is meant to fill a hole, right?
That's exactly right.
It's not meant to replace money going. It's not like free money.
That's exactly right.
That's kind of right.
And
Okay.
you know, we'll see whether there's additional revenue that comes in from federal stimulus efforts. But right now, we can only bank on what we have. And that CARES Act dollar, we have to be very clear. It is not a green light for state legislatures to reduce state spending.
The only thing I have before we move on, Dr. Sullivan, is in my conversation with Dr. Strickland in my part of the world, her enrollment was healthy. Okay, and then I concur with yours that we don't know where this is going to be, but her enrollment for both summer and fall was healthy, right? Because it's about the time of year where you get a good indication of that, right?
That's particularly for summer. So most of our colleges will see their summer terms open around the 20th, 25th of May.
Mm-hmm.
So difficulty is in a typical circumstance, 55% of our enrollment shows up at the college 1 week prior to the start of classes. So the uncertainty of going into that week just before starting of classes is tough when you have that much revenue riding on it. But again, that was under a normal set of circumstances. We don't know that the current environment hasn't changed how students will interact with us, when they show up, how they show up. So there's just a great deal of uncertainty that is causing our colleges to be much more proactive in reaching out to student markets, both in terms of communication as well as their public relations kinds of advertising. So it's a different space.
That's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, that is the only item that I wanted to cover as a part of the care. I'm sorry, I did have one other item as part of the president's report. It's somewhat related. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to sit with Representative Mark Wright, who sponsored House Bill 851. House Bill 851 sought to take authorize the use of CARES Act dollars, stimulus dollars that are non-higher ed dollars. So put aside the money we just discussed, but there's roughly $1.8 billion coming to the state of Louisiana, with about $1 billion of that going to the state, the remaining 600 million roughly going to local governments. we were looking to identify a portion of the state dollars that we could invest in workforce training programs, much as we did following Hurricane Katrina. In that example, in 2005, 2006, we were able to use $20 million in federal funding to train about 16,000 folks in construction trades. It was largely the impetus that has created the strong working relationship we have today with NCCER. Those 16,000 individuals became not only the folks that rebuilt coastal communities, but they also became the core of rebuilding the tax base in Louisiana. And so we have put together a blueprint for recreating that kind of effort under the COVID-19 circumstance, but to do so across a much broader set of sectors, not just construction, but now we're talking about sectors that include construction, but are also manufacturing related and maybe healthcare related and others. So was in front of House Appropriations yesterday, got great feedback from the chairman and others. The bill itself is really not necessary. We just sort of use it as a shell opportunity to tell the story. Members of the committee indicated a very favorable response and focus on if there is a dollar available. What they are looking to do is take one-time money from federal government, stimulus dollars, invest it in a training program that produces a taxpayer that creates a revenue stream that is ongoing. One-time money becoming ongoing revenue. That's what everybody needs. And we represent one of the only opportunities to do that in the short term. So the request that we have out there right now is for $40 million that would generate just over 20,000 graduates within the 2021 fiscal year. Those 20,000 graduates, if the averages remain that we've seen from our graduates over the last few years, would produce roughly $50 million in 2022, the fiscal year 2022. So think of that. Invest one-time money, $40 million, and a year later receive $50 million, and each year thereafter, $50 million. I think all of us would do that as a part of our own retirement plans if that were available to us. So I think it's an area that we'll continue to see a lot of discussion around. I know that at this point, the chair of the workforce subcommittee of the Governor's Resiliency Task Force was on the phone with them this morning and has indicated that proposal will be recommended as a part of the Governor's Task Force from the committee. So we're excited to have it there as a part of the discussion. The folks at Reset Louisiana, which involves Committee of 100, PAR, Cable, those folks, we've gotten a great deal of support from them, and also Lobby. This discussion began with Lobby. Camille Conaway represented Lobby yesterday at the table in House Appropriations. I think there's a great deal of momentum behind this effort, and I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we're not resting on our laurels in the midst of this. We still have a responsibility to the people of Louisiana, and this is what the mission is all about, and we'll continue to try to deliver for our people. So with that, Mr. Chairman, unless there are questions, I'll turn it to you.
The goal of 20,000 graduates. What do you see? Is it allied health? Is it construction? How do you see that split happening?
Great question, because in the example of Hurricane Katrina, construction was an obvious one just because of the devastation that had occurred. In this instance, because it is a statewide and in fact worldwide kind of circumstance, and the sectors are going to be different region by region, what we have done is asked the colleges to partner with the regional economic development officers and allow those regional economic development officers to help inform what we're looking for. So what we are needing in the New Orleans market, as an example, Greater New Orleans Inc. has a much better sense of that than the board office at the LCTCS ever could, because they live that economy every day, or what's going on in Alexandria or Shreveport. So I think ultimately what you're going to find is transportation logistics is going to continue to be a major issue, particularly in the New Orleans market, but also I think it's going to continue to be of concern in the southwest part of the state. Manufacturing and production along the river parish is going to continue to be a strong market. Healthcare is going to be a strong market in every one of our communities going forward. So some of these certifications are things that we are already aware of and already offering. Many of them are not, and I'll give you an example. Contact tracers. Heard this idea that we need a group of folks to help us identify where the virus began and the trail that it left in terms of who it touched. These contact tracers, the initial response that we heard back from the Department of Health was, oh, you got to have a bachelor's degree to do that work. And it's almost like we've seen this movie before, right? The reality is what someone needs in terms of a skill set for that job is not a bachelor's degree. And so we're working now to try to develop that curriculum as well as the certification to make sure we have folks that are able to take advantage of those. So I think the answer is going to be different depending upon the region, as it should be. Economies are regional, and this is a bit of a different approach for us, but I think one that using the example of the mechatronics effort down in Southeast Louisiana with Nunez, Delgado, and North Shore in partnership with firms like Latrim, like McCormick and Elmer's Chocolate. I mean, a whole range of different companies that are engaging with us. These students are, after 7 weeks, are walking out with certifications that get them to $22, $25 an hour. That's what we do. We need to do more of it in this environment.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. Thanks. Nothing else for the report? You good?
We're good. Yes, sir. Thank you.
We'll move on to G, our general action items, and ask Supervisor Smith to present the facilities agenda items. Consideration by the committee.
Sure. The first thing on the agenda is the disposal of the former Baton Rouge Community College West Side campus in Plaquemine.
Sure, I can. I'll provide
Joe,
that.
I think it's prepared to do
Yeah,
it.
I'm on the line.
Very good. Go ahead, Joe.
Good morning, Stevie, Supervisor Smith. This item is an item that is being brought really because of a technical issue. For those of you who may recall, prior to the construction of the new West Side campus, which was constructed with Act 391 funds for BRCC and subsequently transferred over to river parishes per board action later on, there was the original West Side campus under BRCC's management that they operated. And in 2011, the board took action to authorize the system president to dispose of that property through the state land office, which acted as the intermediary, usually acted as the intermediary on behalf of state agencies to sell those properties. However, since then, the state land office no longer provides that functionality to higher ed because we have been authorized through legislation since 2011 to actually dispose of properties directly and not having to have the need to go through the state land office. So in essence, this item is being brought back to the board for action to clarify that action is going to be taken through the systems office and not through the state land office. So if there aren't any questions, I'll read the recommendation. Hearing none, staff recommends that the board authorize the system president to complete all the requirements necessary to sell the former Baton Rouge Community College West Side campus located at 59125 Bayou Road, Plaquemine, to the Iberville Parish School Board. Conveyance documents for the sale of this property will be filed with the local clerk of court and the state land office. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So we've got the recommendation from staff. Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation as presented?
Motion by Mr. Price and a second by Mr. Tim Hardy.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second on the floor. Do we have any questions from anybody regarding this matter? Seeing none, do we have any objections to this motion? Hearing none, that motion carries, and I believe that's the only facility item you have, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent job. Let's move on. Supervisor Hardy, if you'll present the personnel agenda consideration by the committee, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I request a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing item G2, appointment of chancellor for Baton Rouge Community College. At this time, Ms. Klein-Peter, I would ask that you take a roll call vote.
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to take a roll call vote. I think we had a motion by Mr. Price and a second by Mr. Smith to go into executive session.
I am.
And the roll call vote is a affirmative or negative on whether or not you agree to go into executive session. Supervisor Toops,
Yes.
Supervisor Price,
Yeah.
Supervisor Tim Hardy,
Yes.
Supervisor Stevie Smith.
Yes.
Okay, we have a unanimous vote to enter executive session at 11:05 a.m. And at this time, we will go into another room for the executive session. Mr. Chairman, we are back live.
All right, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Hardy to get us back kick-started again.
At this time, Ms. Klein Peter.
And call roll.
Why don't I reconvene the meeting and go ahead and tell everyone that no votes were taken, no consensus was reached during the executive session.
And now I would like to have Ms. Kleinpeter call roll to reestablish the quorum.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Toops,
I am here.
Supervisor Price, Supervisor Hardy,
Here.
Supervisor Smith.
Here.
Hold on, you guys. I think we might still be muted. We might have to do that over.
Katie, this is Joe. No, y'all were not muted.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. We may continue, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Klein Peter. The next item, personnel, appointment of chancellor for Baton Rouge Community College. And before we hear the recommendation, let me just again applaud that process. This was uncharted territory for us, the way it was conducted. It's absolutely new, but when I tell you it was seamless, that is an understatement. I know there's some discussion about whether or not we should always do this in the future. That's not my decision, but I will say that it worked very, very well. And I want to applaud all with special recognition to Ms. Julie Golder of ACCT, but also the staff here, Katie Waldrop, Ms. Kleinpeter, were outstanding. So I just want to congratulate and thank everyone for making the process work so very well. With that having been said, at this time, Mr. President, do you want to read the recommendation?
Sure. Let me ask Joe Marine, if he will, to provide the recommendation.
Yes, sir. Staff recommends that the board appoint Dr. Willie Smith, Sr. as Chancellor of Baton Rouge Community College with an employment contract effective May 6th, 2020 through December 31st, 2023, with a compensation package consisting of an annual base salary of $213,000, a housing allowance of $20,000, a vehicle allowance of $5,000 or the use of a college vehicle, a civic organization allowance of $2,500, and an employer-sponsored deferred compensation package of $20,000.
You have heard the recommendation. Is there a motion?
Motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Price.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion carries. I'd like to remotely congratulate Dr. Smith, and more congratulations will come at a later date. But let me just say again, very excited. The committee unanimously was in favor of Dr. Smith, and we're very excited about it. Congratulations, Dr. Smith. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Really, I want to be in the minutes on what an unprecedented effort that was to make that happen. It is not historically unprecedented one, yes, but for higher ed to have to adapt and move, this is not something that normally happens in anybody's world, much less in the higher ed world. And for Dr. Sullivan to make the call to continue through this, Tim to run the search through it. I'm sure there had to be points when you were thinking, what in the world are we doing? No question. But just great. And to really, my gosh, a dear friend to everybody he covers, this community, the school, the system. He will be a real asset. I know it was a great field of people to choose from. Probably one of the most difficult decisions and searches we've had the opportunity to run. Kudos to everyone. So look, just we move there. We're going to move to section H, which is updates and announcements. Are there any updates or announcements to come before the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to note on record that there have been no requests for public comment.
Okay.
We have Michelle Nardini manning that line, and there have been no requests for public comment.
All right, fantastic. And just to everyone who's graduating during 2020, I don't even want to say our condolences, because I think time will serve that you will realize what a tremendous, unique opportunity you have, not only to talk about this to every future possible employer, to show your ability to adapt, but to your grandkids one day to say, hey, I was the group who graduated during COVID-19, during the great pandemic. So our hats off as a board to every graduate of everybody in the system, including the high schools and the graduates of our four-year system right now. It was tough to finish up, but they did a great job. So our healthcare professionals and frontline professionals who are considered essential and critical everywhere, from the construction teams to all the frontline people, we appreciate them all. And with that, I'll move to I for other business. And the one that I have is nominations for the LCTCS board officers for 2020 and 2022. We have a slating committee that will be made up of Supervisor Smith, Supervisor Murphy, Supervisor Carter, and Supervisor Hardy, all former officers of the board. Any questions on that?
So, Mr. Chairman,
You can't withdraw.
Well, I'm actually going to tell you that. So I've had a chance to talk with Supervisor Murphy and Supervisor Hardy. I haven't talked to Supervisor Carter, and we've done some legwork on this already. Although I'm not sure we're in a position, just posture-wise, that recommendation is not meant to be brought to the board at this meeting, and so. Again, for the board members I've talked to, we were a little bit ahead of schedule in our conversations that we've had, frankly, today. We certainly will be prepared to make a recommendation at the next board meeting, which is the proper schedule.
What is that, the proper schedule? Do we need to do something electronically? We would normally do it at this meeting, right?
No, we would normally announce the slate
At
at the
the
June meeting
Okay.
and it would be approved. And
So uncertain at this point. I think the likelihood is we will be doing a virtual meeting in June.
Okay.
Is what we're planning for a June virtual meeting, but if we can be in the same room, we would love to see everyone for sure.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Smith. And with that, item J is our adjournment. I request a motion to adjourn this unique and one of a kind
so
meeting.
motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Price. And the meeting stands adjourned at 11:34
Very good.
a.m. And I will
Good.